It was a Category 5 hurricane, Irma. A storm unlike any the Caribbean paradise of St. Thomas had seen before.
It was in some ways a perfect storm of chaos. If someone's going to vanish from the island without any trace, it could have happened then.
And that's exactly what happened. 32-year-old Hannah Upp, a beloved teacher at a local Montessori school, had ridden out the storm, only to disappear 8 days later. What many people didn't know is that this was not the first time Hannah had disappeared.
I did not know about her previous disappearances.
Doctors diagnosed her with dissociative fugue. This rare disorder is sometimes known as the Jason Bourne syndrome.
What's your name? I don't know.
Hi, everyone.
Hello.
I'm Lauren.
I am Ken.
And this is Paradise After Dark.
Dark.
Vacation Edition.
Indeed it is.
And if you're listening to this, that means you're a patron.
And we love you.
And we thank you so much for supporting the show.
So tonight we have a Vacation Edition case that I find very fascinating, which has actually changed my mind, or not necessarily my mind, but my view on a lot of popular true crime cases out there. One that's probably one of the most famous in particular that we'll discuss maybe a little bit later when we get into it. But it'll definitely make you think a little bit differently on some of the cases that you see where people are missing and you don't know why.
So tonight we're going to tell you the story of Hannah Upp.
That's UPP.
Yes, Hannah Upp, UPP. She was a young school teacher living on the island of St. Thomas in the U.S. Virgin Islands when she disappeared on September 14th of 2017. The details surrounding her disappearance are strange, and so are the details of her past, but we'll get into that a little later. So Hannah was originally from Oregon. She attended and graduated from the Pennsylvania Seven Sisters School in 2007 and moved to New York City, where she was a middle school Spanish teacher at Harlem's Thurgood Marshall Academy. In 2012, she moved to Maryland and took a job at a Montessori school there. Hannah moved to St. Thomas in 2014 to, quote, start over.
Yeah, when she moved to St. Thomas, she found a job as a teacher there as well. And this was at the Virgin Islands Montessori School. And she loved living in St. Thomas. Who wouldn't? I mean, beautiful island living.
Yep.
That was kind of her speed. You'll kind of see as we go along here that was very fitting for her. And she spent a lot of her spare time at the beach, snorkeling and, of course, at the time frame, Zumba.
Doing Zumba, yeah.
Which was real popular at the time.
Yep. Well, Hurricane Irma passed over St. Thomas as a Category 5 storm on September 6th of 2017, with peak winds of 178 miles per hour, killing more than 30 people on the island.
Yeah, a lot of the people listening to this right now understand what we're talking about with Hurricane Irma.
With Hurricane Irma. So the storm caused devastating damage to Hannah's home, but she did survive. But to the horror of everyone in the Caribbean and beyond, another powerful hurricane was headed their way less than 2 weeks later. That was Hurricane Maria.
This was the one that smashed Puerto Rico really bad, I believe.
Yes. So during this time, there's been one hurricane. There's another big, powerful hurricane bearing down on them. So thousands of islanders were scrambling to leave St. Thomas.
Hurricane Maria, I mean, it was another Category 5 hurricane.
Yeah.
And it came kind of barreling towards.
Right, but not Hannah. She had no intention of leaving for either hurricane. In the documentary titled Vanished in Paradise, Hannah's ex-boyfriend, Joey Spallino, explained that Hannah's, quote, heart was in St. Thomas, so she decided to stay behind despite her house having been wrecked by Irma. She was seen the day before she disappeared at the school where she worked, although her colleague noticed she was acting oddly and using a sing-song voice.
What is that?
like a sing-song voice,
Like, yeah, everything's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Exactly. Which apparently was not like her.
So it was kind of like whimsical. It wasn't necessarily that, like.
Yeah, it was just, according to her colleague, it was just odd.
Okay.
She was acting oddly. On September 14th, Hannah told her housemates that she was going back to the school where she worked to prep her classroom for the next hurricane, but she never arrived at the school and she never came back home. Then, on September 15th, a day after she was last seen leaving her home, Hannah failed to show up for a staff meeting at the school she worked at. When Hannah's best friend, Maggie Guzman, called Hannah's mother, Barbara Bellis, and friends back in the States, she was told something strange. She was told to look for Hannah near water. Now, Maggie had no idea what that meant, but went to Hannah's favorite spot near the water, a place called Sapphire Beach.
Yeah, and there they found a beach bar that had been previously destroyed by Hurricane Irma. But Hannah's car was parked there in the parking area with her purse in it, which had her passport and hundreds of dollars inside. And inside the ruins of the bar, there were Hannah's sarong, sundress, and sandals neatly folded and placed on a bar stool. But there was no Hannah in sight. So obviously they knew she had been there because her car's parked there. They found all the stuff.
It was as if she had gone there to just go to the beach.
Yeah.
But
all
she
the
was
signs
gone.
Exactly. All the signs of her being there were there, except she was not.
She was not there. So look near water is what her family and friends back home told Maggie Guzman, her best friend in St. Thomas. What did that mean? Well, what her friends and colleagues in St. Thomas didn't know was that this was not the first time that Hannah had disappeared. Back in New York in August of 2008, just as she was set to start her second year of teaching at Harlem's Thurgood Marshall Academy, she left her New York City apartment to go jogging and failed to return. Her roommate found her wallet, passport, Metro card, and cell phone in her purse on the floor in her bedroom. It was as if the city had simply opened wide and swallowed her whole. The New York Times wrote about her 2008 disappearance.
Yeah, and investigators feared that she had been kidnapped or worse.
But 9 days after she vanished, she was spotted at an Apple store in Manhattan where she checked her email. A man in the store recognized her and asked her whether she was the missing teacher in the news. She casually brushed him off, dismissing the possibility.
It almost seemed like she didn't know or she was hiding.
A detective asked Hannah's mother to come to the 13th precinct in Harlem to view the Apple store surveillance footage. Now, her mother positively identified the woman in the video as Hannah.
So obviously the man recognized her and notified the authorities.
Right.
Okay. And then obviously they did what they were supposed to do because she's missing and talked to the mother.
2 days after Hannah was seen at the Apple store, she was spotted at a Starbucks in Soho. By the time the police arrived, she had walked out the back door. So that's more like hiding if she walked out the back door.
That's what I'm saying. This whole scenario seems like she was trying to hide.
The police recorded sightings of her at 5 New York sports clubs, all of them near Midtown, where the detective on the case presumed she had gone to shower. On September 16th of 2008, 20 days after she vanished, Hannah was found floating face down in the water near Robbins Reef, a rocky outcropping with a lighthouse south of the Statue of Liberty. Yeah,
there were 2 men who worked on the ferry deck nearby and were directed to rescue the woman after she was spotted by a captain. They hoisted her up, and as they did, she kind of heaved for air. I guess they assumed that when they seen her face down,
they thought she was dead.
She was dead, but she was alive. But she obviously needed hospitalization due to suffering from hypothermia, dehydration, and severe sunburn on one side of her body.
When she was rescued from the waters, she said she had gone for a jog, and that was the last thing she remembered. While in the hospital, it took time for her to reconcile the fact that 20 days had passed since then, and she simply had no memory of any of it.
Like Rip Van Winkle.
I went from going for a run to being in an ambulance, Hannah said in an interview with the New York Times 5 months after her disappearance. It was like 10 minutes had passed, but it was almost 3 weeks. When the medical staff asked her questions, she was suddenly able to tell them that her name was Hannah and to give them her mother's phone number. Now, her mother, Barbara, arrived within an hour. The first thing she said was, "Why am I wet?" Barbara told the New Yorker.
Manuel Ramirez, her roommate, said she saw me and smiled and said something like, "I hope to release me soon because I have to set up my classroom." She clearly didn't get that 3 weeks had already passed. Now, Hannah was transferred to a psychiatric unit run by the Columbia University Medical Center. And here she went through a series of brain imaging tests, but the doctors couldn't find any neurological condition that would cause her to forget her identity entirely. And they concluded that the episode was psychological in nature.
As soon as she was lifted from the river, she remembered all the details of her life prior to her disappearance. She was given a diagnosis of dissociative fugue, a rare condition in which people lose access to their autobiographical memory and personal identity, occasionally adopting a new one, and may abruptly embark on a long journey. It is characterized by sudden travel and a failure to recall the past. The illness tends to be precipitated by trauma, though Hannah could not recall any traumatic events in her past. Her condition has been dubbed the Jason Bourne syndrome after Matt Damon's famous character in the Bourne series, Bourne movies.
Does that mean she could fight really good and shoot guns?
No.
Oh.
This condition can last for days, months, or even years at a time. However, someone with this condition will still have the ability to survive and function. They may suddenly wake up and find themselves in a new place with no memory of traveling there, as is what happened in Hannah's case. According to Psychology Today, dissociative fugue is extremely rare, thought to affect as little as 0.2% of the general population.
Well, that is a little more than COVID.
Ramirez, her roommate, said that when he visited her on the psychiatric unit, she was her normal, upbeat, funny self. I remember her rattling off all these possibilities. Was I in a hit and run? Was I mugged? Was I assaulted?
Well, see, and that's what I find interesting because it's almost like a temporary amnesia. Mm-hmm. But of course, the time frame's not there, and it's hard to wrap my head around this particular. What do we call it? It's a condition. Let's call it a condition. It's not a disease.
No, I'd say it's a condition.
A condition, because like in the Jason Bourne series, he was trying the whole time he'd get these little flashbacks, but he couldn't quite put all the puzzle pieces together.
Right.
Well, here's a situation where she would actually go all the way back to everything that she had. So she would just basically lose time for 3 weeks, 2 weeks, or whatever it was. Mm-hmm. But then everything would come back like normal. But then she would forget that whole 3 weeks is there. And I can't wrap my head around how that could be. That's almost like multiple personalities.
Well, see, when I was researching this and I was thinking, and it's no secret to our listeners, I've talked about it, that I get some pretty severe anxiety at times. And there's been situations, say for example, when my father was in the hospital with a heart problem and it was not looking so good, it was nowhere near like a dissociative fugue, but I had a very, very strange, weird, condition, I guess you would call it, where it felt like nothing was real. It felt like I was watching a movie. Like everything around me was not real. It was
Is this
a movie.
real life?
No,
Yeah.
really. I mean, and it's a really unsettling feeling. But I can it's not the same thing, but when it talks about like trauma can trigger it, it's like, it just makes me think like I've experienced something almost similar, definitely not a fugue, but I can see how that might happen.
Yeah.
I can totally see how that might happen if it was, something crazy. I don't know.
Yeah. Well,
I don't know how to explain what I'm trying to say.
Well, that's why, and for me, it was like, I couldn't wrap my head around how, cause me, it's almost like everything, there's times where things move in slow motion or things move really fast. Like things start coming at you fast and you like panic a little bit, sort of like a panic attack, if you will. But in this situation, it's almost like she loses time and goes away and then comes right back. Mm-hmm. And I guess there's in some conditions to where this can actually go months or years. In her case, at this particular case, it was 3 weeks.
Yep.
So, that gap of time, there's no definitive gap, because if they stay in that state for a long period of time, they could go, according to what I read, years and then snap back.
Yeah.
So anyway, I just found that really interesting. So anyway, well, while Hannah was in the hospital, she was reading some of these news articles about her disappearance. And the comments from some of the readers, they were accusing her of staging this whole thing.
Well, yeah, I think you're always going to have that in a weird situation.
I mean, that's the thing though, is it would suck to be like, this is real, this is really happening, but yet they're accusing you of staging.
Yeah. She was so embarrassed that she contemplated changing her name, but ultimately decided not to run away from who she really was.
That's a smart move.
So after this first episode of the fugue state, Hannah managed to go on with her life seemingly as normal. 5 years would go by before Hannah suffered her second episode of the rare amnesia disorder. In 2013, Hannah was working as an assistant teacher at a Montessori school in Kensington, Maryland. On the morning of Hannah's first day of class, her mother was informed by police that her daughter's wallet and phone had been found on a footpath. A colleague reported that she was driving to school and she saw Hannah walking quickly in the wrong direction. She was missing for 2 days when she regained her memory while in a creek in Wheaton, Maryland, a mile and a half from her school, with a shopping trolley next to her.
Some people call it a buggy, others call it a cart.
Whatever, shopping cart, shopping trolley.
Well, that's what I said. Some people call it different names. Well, here's something. Would you think the first day of school was something that would like?
Well, here we're getting into, the first time around it happened, she was getting ready to start school. It happened in September. And here we are again, right before she starts school, it happens again. So when she found herself in a creek with a shopping cart next to her. She walked to the closest commercial area and borrowed a stranger's phone so she could call her mom, who immediately came to retrieve her.
So, this is a scenario where it happened very quickly.
Yes, it was only like 2 days this time.
Yeah, very rapid.
A year later, Hannah moved to St. Thomas. Before we go back to her disappearance in St. Thomas, I really want to talk about Rachel Aviv wrote an expose about Hannah and her ordeal in The New Yorker in March of 2008, titled How a Young Woman Lost Her Identity. And I'd really like to share a few insights I got from this expose that I read. According to this article, as a child, Hannah was, quote, the princess of her church, as a friend described her. She grew up in a Japanese American church in Oregon, where her parents served as pastors. Both of her parents are American, but Barbara taught in Japan and is fluent in Japanese. When she was young, her parents' perspective on theology sharply diverged. David Upp, Hannah's father, characterized himself with the phrase homo unis libri, meaning, which is Latin for man of the one book.
Probably referring to the Bible.
In monthly newsletters sent to colleagues, congregants, and friends, he argued that there is no such human as a natural homosexual, and he urged his readers to fully support biblical morality and to oppose any compromise with sexual deviance or perversion. Now, Barbara, Hannah's mom, filed for divorce when Hannah was 15. David Upp moved abroad and taught the gospel often to indigenous tribes in Fiji, Palau, Guam, Malta, India, Zimbabwe, Guyana, and the Philippines, where he now lives in a one-room house in a remote village. In 2007, Barbara took leave from her position as a pastor and moved to Pendle Hill, a Quaker retreat in Philadelphia. Now, Hannah identified as a creationist when she was in college. Creationism is a religious belief that nature and aspects such as the universe, earth, life, and humans originated with supernatural acts of divine creation. In its broadest sense, creationism includes a continuum of religious views which vary in their acceptance or rejection of scientific explanations, such as evolution, that describe the origin and development of natural phenomena. She joined the InterVarsity Christian Fellowship, an evangelical campus ministry. Now, her friend, Pillai Bhattacharya, who was raised Hindu, once asked Hannah, "Do you think I'm going to hell?" She said that Hannah began crying. Hannah lost it. She couldn't answer the question, whereas another person might try to defend her beliefs. Hannah is the kind of person who would take the question like that and turn it on herself and think about it and come out on the other end being a different person. Now, her friend went on, she knew she was loving and open-hearted, but beyond that, I think she had zero idea of who she actually was. She wanted to give herself over to someone or some idea. In the spring of her sophomore year, Barbara said, Hannah called her crying after going to a talk by Beth Stroud, a United Methodist minister who was defrocked after telling her congregation that she was in a relationship with a woman. Hannah was troubled that something like that she thought was part of her faith was cruel, Barbara said. Now, by her junior year of college, Hannah was dating a woman. So, although she found herself drawn to Quakerism, she still traveled with her father at least once a year in whatever part of the world he was teaching.
Wait,
now,
so Hannah was dating a woman?
Yes.
Okay. For some reason, I missed that.
Well, I just said it.
I know, but I'm saying when I was looking into it and doing the stuff, I never caught that.
It's not a big part of the story.
Well, I understand that, but it is if she has all this religious backing. So.
Well, I'm going to get to that. So, side note, members of the various Quaker movements are all generally united by their belief in the ability of each human being to access the light within, or that of God in everyone, or presence of God exists in every person. Quakers rejected elaborate religious ceremonies, don't have official clergy, and believe in spiritual equality for men and women. Now, Hannah's friend, Hannah Wood, wondered what it meant for Hannah to, quote, swallow a part of herself down while she was traveling with her father. But Hannah always spoke fondly of her father.
Meaning that she obviously was hiding the fact.
She had much different beliefs than her father. And obviously at one point she had been in a relationship with a woman, which, as we said earlier, was very much against her father's beliefs.
That was a huge no-no, exactly. So what I'm saying is that's why she would hide. That's what she meant by swallow down part of her.
Right.
Okay.
So her friends like to joke that she resided in Hannah Land. Her friend Amy Scott said she lives in this separate place where there are butterflies and birds and they follow her around. Everything is good and everyone is happy and there's no conflict ever.
So you kind of have to wonder as a spiritual person, like I was saying, if this conflict of beliefs coupled with an apparent conflict with her sexuality could have been traumatizing enough to cause her dissociative fugue.
Yeah. That was kind of where my thinking went, because at one point she was actually hypnotized to see if she could remember any sort of traumatizing event or something in her life that would cause her to go into these fugue states. And she still had nothing. She still came up with nothing.
Yeah. So, what do they say it usually contributes to it? I guess it is something traumatizing.
Trauma.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's trauma.
And keep in mind, trauma doesn't necessarily always mean something vicious, because, everybody's trauma is a little bit different. In her case, it could have been. It could
have definitely been.
If your father was strictly
a
by the book.
conflict of beliefs.
Yeah. if he's strictly by the book and you feel like you're doing wrong by your father and you've done all this traveling with him and all that just, I suppose.
So back to the New Yorker expose. Hannah's fugue seemed to fit what Etzel Cardenia, a professor of psychology at Lund University in Sweden, described as anomalous psychological experience. Cardenia has published a textbook on phenomena that fall between the cracks of the house built by contemporary mainstream psychology. In our culture, we have a nice narrative that personality is stable, This is fiction. When a person enters a fugue and becomes someone else or isn't there, it's an exaggerated version of the way we all are. Cardina has done research on altered states of consciousness in religious practice, and he found that some people who would otherwise be given a diagnosis of dissociative disorder have been able to channel their tendencies into rituals of spirit possession, trance, speaking in tongues, or intimate experiences of God.
Almost the kind of thing that you would have, that you feel like you would. What's that show we watched the other night where they were doing the exorcism? It was something like that, but then she's speaking all these different languages, and it's and they kind of discuss some of this a little bit.
The Exorcism of Emily Rose.
Yeah, where they talked.
We watched that movie the other night.
Yeah, so I mean, it was kind of like some of that that they're just behaving like totally different people.
Right. So he said, this is still Cardina, is a cultural context of surrounding themselves. It's not about getting rid of the dissociative state so much as giving it a syntax, a coherence, a social function.
Meaning? Like allowing it to happen?
Yes.
Like, or not necessarily controlling it, but not fighting it off.
Yes.
Okay. Like, yeah, like it says, giving it a social function. So in other words, let it just be part of you.
In an article in the journal Spiritus, T.M. Lerman, a Stanford anthropologist who studies religion and psychiatry, suggests that there is a shared psychological mechanism in disassociation and evangelical worship. The capacity to withdraw from the everyday and become entirely absorbed by interior experience. Trance-like responses to great distress have occurred throughout history and across culture, she wrote. So there's that theory.
So that theory there is saying that it's more along the lines of a spiritual.
Right.
It's not necessarily a mental or psychological thing, but saying it's spiritual, but yet they can use their psychological strengths to control the spiritual aspect of it.
Right.
Okay.
But I don't think Hannah was doing this on purpose. I mean, I don't think that she was purposely going into a fugue state or disassociating.
Exactly, because she's going to her first day of school. It's not like she's going to a worship. She's not going into like a worship scenario. She's not going like her first day of church or a new ministry or something like that. This is going into school. So to me, it just seems like the spiritual aspect would not be a theory that I would roll with.
So you have to notice and take into account the similarities between her first two disappearances. In the first instance, she disappeared at the beginning of the school year after traveling with her father. You have to wonder if traveling and, as mentioned above, having to hide a huge portion of her identity, meaning her spiritual beliefs, could have been a trigger. Now, Hannah's father disputes this idea. He told the New Yorker, "Travel, that's just what we do. And Hannah and I have been to 25 nations together, so it is normal, not disruptive." In both fugues, she had been drawn to water. Her friend Amy Scott said the way she describes it is she finds herself in a body of water and realizes who she is. After the Maryland disappearance, the police proposed using a type of ankle bracelet designed for people who are under house arrest.
Well, that would have sucked.
While she didn't want to pursue it, she refused to be defined by this.
I don't blame her.
And her mother says, "I chose to honor her decision. I had to be clear that I'm not living my daughter's life. She's living it, and she needed to have the freedom to make choices."
Yeah, who wants to get like away from a house and have somebody call and you got to run back and answer the phone?
It wouldn't be like house arrest. It would just be like a GPS.
Oh, sorry, I don't really know all that much about house arrest. I'm just put that out there. No, I'm kidding. I actually do. My brothers. All right. But anyway, so yeah, I can definitely understand why she would oppose that.
Yeah. So let's fast forward and get back to 2017, right after Hurricane Irma hit St. Thomas.
It's a different world after Irma.
As we learned, what people are doing in the days and weeks leading up to their disappearance can be helpful in figuring out where they may have gone. 6 days after the storm, Hannah drove to the house of her ex-boyfriend, Joe Spallino, a scuba instructor, and saw his belongings were gone. Hannah learned from his landlord that he had rushed to the marina to get on one of the Mercy ships, giving people free rides off the island.
Wait, so he bailed? He was going to bail out? Oh, it was her ex-boyfriend.
Yes.
Okay. See, never mind. Sorry. I was thinking he was going to bail out, sort of like that dude on Titanic.
So Hannah drove to the marina to say goodbye. Spallino was waiting to board the cruise ship to Puerto Rico, and they talked for several hours. He said, I kind of jokingly asked, what if you came along? She thought about it and said that in reality she wouldn't want to. She never used her phone again after she left the marina. The next day, she helped Norma Bollinger, the owner of the school where Hannah worked, prepared the school for Hurricane Maria by taking pictures off the wall. Bollinger said she responded to everything I asked with, yes, Norma, yes, Norma, yes, Norma, which normally wasn't her tone of voice to me. Hannah was not a yes sort of person. If you asked her to do something, she would want to know why.
Well, here's another scenario before the person said that she was using a sing-song voice. So This is sort of, maybe it's not something that just like snaps. This is, she is progressing into that phase. That's what it seems like to me, because in the original one, the few other times, it was a sing-song voice, people around her, so she was acting and behaving differently already.
Mm-hmm.
So she was still in her mindset that she was still Hannah. She was still doing what she had to do, but here's a scenario where she was just behaving uniquely to this person.
So that night, Hannah's 3 roommates told her that they were all trying to leave the island, but Hannah refused to leave. The next morning, Hannah said that she was headed to school and a roommate watched her get in her car, but she never showed up at the school. And the following day, there was a faculty meeting and she wasn't there either.
Now that's something that's unlike her as well.
Right. Now her friend, Maggie Guzman, who we mentioned earlier, called Hannah's closest friends on the island and in the States, but no one had spoken to her for 3 days. Now, it was the same time of year as her previous 2 fugue states, and they told Guzman to search near water.
Makes sense.
So here we are now at Sapphire Beach with Hannah's car, wallet, money, clothes, but no Hannah. Searchers checked the shoreline and a small island nearby where the current might have taken her. The Coast Guard sent 3 helicopters up to look for her. And her friends also checked the manifests of people evacuating on the Mercy ships, but her name wasn't listed.
Now that I saw that, but I'm curious if she had already gone into the fugue state, she wouldn't necessarily know what her name is. So maybe she could have given any name she wanted.
That's true.
So just something there was a couple things that I considered that in just the sing-song stuff and the way she was behaving. But of course, the people in St. Thomas had no idea what obviously had transpired previously with her.
Right. So after 3 days, they had to call off the search to prepare for Hurricane Maria. Now, mind you, this whole time, there's a Category 5 hurricane headed their way.
And it was huge. I mean, anybody that was here that saw Irma,
and then
after
Maria.
Irma, we were devastated. Then, of course, you're looking at you're looking at TV and all you're doing is saying, please, Maria, don't come here.
Yeah.
And it missed us, and then nobody really cared about Maria because we were still scratching our broke asses with Irma.
So Maggie Guzman recalled in the documentary Vanished in Paradise, the night of Hurricane Maria was awful. It was the worst night of my life. This hurricane is passing over this island, and I have no idea what happened to Hannah or where she is. In the wake of the 2 hurricanes, detectives say it would have been easy to travel around the Caribbean without identification.
Exactly.
When the storms subsided, her friends organized another search. They circled the island and all the cays in a rescue boat and also canvassed the airport, the homeless shelters, the beaches, and the hospitals, and interviewed captains who came in and out of the island's marinas. They even went to the morgue and looked at 10 unclaimed bodies. None of them were Hannah. Now, one of Hannah's friends, Jake Bradley, who is also an emergency medical technician, told the Virgin Islands Daily News on September 26 that, "We've done all the physical searching that I think we can do other than having her posters up everywhere. That's going to be the only way. Hopefully if she sees one of them If she's in her fugue state, it would at least get her to the point where she realizes something's wrong and she goes to get help. That's what we're hoping for. Now, Hannah's mother, Barbara, came to the island to search for her daughter. She went to Hannah's favorite beaches, restaurants, and shops. I do have the sense sometimes that she's around any corner, Barbara told the New Yorker. She talks to Hannah's friends and colleagues, trying to understand her last known interactions. So as of today, the search for Hannah continues. Her loved ones have set up a dedicated Facebook page and a GoFundMe account to help continue the search. The links for these will be in the show notes. And her family and friends have not given up hope that Hannah is alive somewhere and possibly stuck in a fugue state.
And they shouldn't, and here's one of those, like I said earlier, it's kind of like a scenario like this in a couple of the cases that are missing people that we've discussed, or, they call them unsolved or whatever you might say. So one of the cases when looking into this and learning about this fugue state, because of course once I read it, then I really wanted to know, what all this is about. And, there's some pretty popular cases where this is actually, this is not the only case that this has happened, but, to this extreme, it's the only case it's happened. But the one case that really hit I guess it really just hit that guitar string just right and played loudly in my head was Maura Murray.
Yep, I knew that's what you were going to say in the beginning.
Well, one of the things that kind of threw me off was when they said that she was acting differently, the sing-song voice, and that's why I wanted to reemphasize that when we were talking about it, how the other girl said, yes, ma'am, yes, ma'am, yes, no. She never was like that. Well, remember when the bus driver pulled up and she said that she was acting very strangely for a girl that, needed help. And everybody said that she was acting kind of strange there.
And she did some strange things. She packed up her dorm room.
Exactly.
So
she
could have even been in her fugues. We're talking about Maura Murray. Then this is totally theoretical.
Oh, 100%. I'm saying that this is something that, it could bring back, like saying that she maybe is still there, still alive.
Right. So, she could have even been in her fugue state when she packed up her dorm and was researching where to stay in the Vermont or, Stowe, Vermont, the mountains, and started driving there.
Exactly.
Because nobody ever figured out where she was going or what she was doing or why.
Why? Because the big thing is, why was she in New Hampshire?
Yeah.
So.
And if anybody has no idea what we're talking about, all you got to do is Google Maura Murray and you will find.
I would hope that anyone listening to this that listens to Paradise After Dark would know something about Maura Murray. We do, because that's kind of what got Lauren started on this whole thing, but that's a whole off topic for you guys. But that's kind of one of those things where I was like, well, remember the sing-song voice. So this was not something that it was like just it changes like that. It's a progression. And so like Lauren said, it's possible that she could have been in a fugue state and then slowly, like Hannah Up did, slowly start changing. And then all of a sudden, boom, it hits you and then you're gone, because she said, she went running. I'm referring to Hannah. She went running, and the next thing you know, she felt like 10 minutes later, she was being pulled in by this boat to get us 3 weeks.
Yeah.
And like I said, in what I've read, and if you look it up, you can see some of the stuff where it could actually go for years. That's one of those things where it just blows your mind. Like, it could potentially be exactly what James Renner says. Maybe she did end up in Canada. Maybe somebody saw her there, but she doesn't know who she is, and it might not be her fault at all.
Right.
So, but the Maura Murray case was the one that really came to my mind and hit me really hard. Because I'm like, holy cow. And of course, not just her case, but if you think of so many different cases where, people were acting strangely and all of a sudden they just disappeared. And the one that we covered and we actually had to take it down, we can tell you guys because we're on Patreon, the Lauren Derulo case.
DeMullo.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I don't know why I keep saying, I said Derulo like 3 times the whole time we did that case. Where that could potentially be the thing too. She was in a traumatic situation as well. They said that she wanted to leave the situation she was in.
Yeah.
And she was looking at different apartments. Well, there's another progression thing. So there's so many times that we've covered cases of missing people that could potentially be something none other than just a fugue state which I'll be honest, I really didn't know much about any of that at all until Lauren said, hey, I've got this case. And so you start looking into it and you're like, what the hell is this? It is that rare. So anyway, I didn't mean to interrupt where you were going there. I just had to say about the Moore Murray and some of the other cases because it just puts a new spin on missing person cases.
It does. Yeah. I mean, you just never know.
Some of the other ones, I looked them up. Some of the other cases, they said it was a Shirley Mason, also known as Sybil, would disappear and then reappear with no recollection of what happened during the time span. She recalls being here and then not here and having no identity of herself. And then there's Jody Roberts. She was a reporter from Tacoma News Tribune. She disappeared in 1985. She was found 12 years later in Sitka, Alaska, living under the name Jane D. Williams. While there was some initial suspicion that she had been faking amnesia, some experts have come to believe that she genuinely experienced a protracted fugue state. That's what it says right here. So here's a 12-year span. So all I can say is, like, you know, if your Moore Murray case, I mean, that's, you know, well, that just goes to show that it can happen.
Going on 16 years now.
But I'm saying that here's a 12-year scenario. They found her and told her who she was. She thought that she was living under Jane D. Williams. There's also, just real quick, David Fitzpatrick, dissociative fugue disorder. He was actually profiled on 5's television series, Extraordinary People. He entered a fugue state on December 4th of 2005 and is still working today, regaining his entire life's memories. So These are scenarios to just keep in mind that, it's not just so, it's rare, but it's rare enough that some of these cases of these people you never heard of where they come up missing, keep this in mind. And if anything it does, it gives you hope. If they're not found, if you don't find them or a body, there's still a chance, you know, and like we tell every parent or people we talk to, you know, just keep fighting, keep the word out there. I don't know. It added like a new fire, like a hope. There's hope there. And I don't know, that to me just is something that's just spectacular when there's hope and it's genuine. It could literally be, you just pray that there's something and this is something that you could hold on to.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's all my ramblings.
All right. Well,
I'm excited. This was a good case. This was really a good case.
St. Thomas is not too far away from Florida. So
book the cruise?
So in our show notes, we're going to put who to call if you happen to find Hannah.
Well, and you know, look up her picture. I mean, she's got tattoos.
Yep.
So there's identifying marks.
Yep.
But if you are Hannah Up, but you don't know you're Hannah Up,
you're Hannah Up.
You're not really going to be looking and seeing that kind of stuff, you know. And
right.
You know. So anyway,
that's it for tonight.
Well, thank you, everyone. That's Vacation Edition, and we really appreciate it. Oh, we have a new patron.
Oh, yes. Christine.
Christine, thank you very much.
Coming in at the true crime level. That's the highest level that there is.
Love it.
All right. Thank you, Christine. And thank you to all of our patrons. Your support means the world to us.
You guys are great, and thanks for being patient with us while we take our little break.
And
it's definitely needed, especially right now.
So
we love you, and thank you very much for listening
to Paradise After Dark.
Dark.